Hi guys, welcome to another video. So sorry it's been a few days since I last uploaded, but I'm back now. Just been a little bit busy with friends and everything and family. So today we're on the description of the character traits of the Sagittarius sign in astrology. Now I did already record a few minutes of this video prior to today's recording, but I got disturbed, so I had to delete that. Plus I don't think I explained that very well, so I just scrapped that and thought I'd redo it all again now in one video recording. So yeah, so there was this website I came across and I found it really interesting, so I thought I would just share it. I don't actually have to hand the name of the website, but I'll leave the link in the description box of this video if anyone's interested in checking it out. But I already had like a surface level understanding of this before, where each four signs of the zodiac, divided into three, represent three different like levels of the soul's evolution, if you like. So there was what I referred to as the survival signs, which are the first four: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. Then the social signs: the Leo, the Virgo, the Libra, and the Scorpio. And then the spiritual signs, which are the Sagittarius, the Capricorn, the Aquarius, and the Pisces. This website, though, it put it in a very similar way, but I liked the way it described it. There's basically the first four, it said, are the personal signs, the second four are the relationship signs, and the last four are the universal signs, which I like the explanation of it that the website used, so I just thought I'd put that out there. So in that same vein, basically, Sagittarius, which is obviously the sign which is the topic of this video, they are the first universal sign, or if you like, spiritual sign. So whichever term you want to use to describe them, they're the first one that's like that. In other words, they're the first sign which is a highly evolved soul. It's the high state of evolution, and it is the first sign in astrology which sort of represents or manifests that high stage of soul evolution, if you like, a highly evolved soul. Because they're 9 out of 12, they're getting closer to the end of the zodiac, so they are the first sign which represents this spiritual or universal level of evolution of the soul, if you like. So it's everyone you want to use to describe it, but that's kind of Sagittarius is the first one to do that in astrology, represent that. So Sagittarius is a fire sign, and they are the end of Sagittarius, the 29th degree, in other words, the last degree of the Sagittarius sign, is basically where in astrology the fire element dies, because Sagittarius is the last fire sign. And fire is technically the least evolved soul element because it is the first one to die toward the end of the zodiac. So fire is the first one to go. So Sagittarius is the last fire sign. And fire and water do go in the natural order as well. Weirdly, earth and air don't, but fire and water do go in the natural order where the cardinal sign does come first, and followed by the fixed, and then the mutables last. So Sagittarius is the final fire sign. It's where the fire dies in astrology, and it's the mutable mode for the fire element sign. So Sagittarius is almost, I like to describe them as kind of a mix of both the Aries and the Leo character traits within one personality as a whole. Of course, they have their unique individual personality as well, but because they are the mutable mode and therefore they do have this aspect of adaptability, which the other two don't have as much, they are, in a sense, the most complex fire sign. In a sense, they are the most complicated fire sign to describe the character traits of them, because they are the most complicated in a certain sense, because they are almost a mix of Aries and Leo character traits combined together in one person, and then that equals the final result of Sagittarius personality traits. So it's kind of like the mix of Aries and Leo in one personality. It's a good way I like to think of them as. They are ruled by Jupiter. Their planetary ruler is Jupiter, which me as a Pisces sun, I am ruled by Neptune, but also Jupiter as a mild co-ruler as well. So I kind of do, to an extent, share this mild Jupiter influence of rulership with Sagittarius. So I will say I feel like Sagittarius is probably the fire sign which is closest to my personality as a Pisces, just because even though we're both mutable for elements that aren't compatible, and that places us on a square to each other, so we're not overly compatible for that reason, because we both share this sort of Jupiter rulership influence in our lives, we do have this same sort of ethos, if you like our philosophy of life is similar at its core. Obviously, our mode of expressing it is like totally different and opposite in a sense, but we do still have the core of that philosophy of life is similar between both the Sagittarius and the Pisces. So Sagittarius then Jupiter. So because they're ruled by Jupiter, Jupiter is the planet of luck, positive gains in life. It's the planet of optimism. It's a planet of happy-go-lucky attitude. Basically, the sort of principle of Jupiter in astrology as a planet is that Jupiter expands and magnifies whatever it touches. So if you're happy and then Jupiter comes along, it's going to expand that sense of happiness and optimism until it's absolutely huge, like it's on a massive scale. That's kind of what they do with everything. But on the slightly more not as good side of, like, the more shadow side, the not as favorable side of Jupiter, because it's a great planet. It's probably the nicest planet in astrology, but of course every planet will also have a dark side too. And the dark side of Jupiter is that it leads to excesses in everything. And because it magnifies and expands everything, you can imagine that if the emotion that exists before Jupiter comes along is already negative, if Jupiter's expanded everything, it's going to expand that negative emotion until that's expanded to a huge scale or level of intensity as well, if you sort of catch my drift. So it's kind of like the expansion can go both ways, of either good or bad, dependent on what the emotional feeling was already at before Jupiter came along, in terms of was it a positive theme or a negative theme. And just the fact that excesses of all kinds are possible with Jupiter. So excesses of joy, but also excesses of alcohol consumption, excesses of drugs. Jupiter is excesses of everything, pretty much. So you can imagine the dark side of Jupiter when it comes into the equation. It does magnify and expand everything. Now, the main core character trait that I think most people could agree on, though, about Sagittarius is that they are highly optimistic. It's very, very hard for a Sagittarius to ever suffer from depression, I feel like, at least for long periods of time, because they're probably the least likely sign to suffer from depression or even anxiety for long periods of time, because they're optimistic, they're self-confident as well, but they're so optimistic, and that's the major trait of Sagittarius that I think most people could agree on, and that's because of their rulership, Jupiter rulership. So Pisces is slightly less optimistic, but they do still have this high optimism as well, because they also share Jupiter rulership. So that's kind of what they have in common as well. Combined with fire, which is obviously already a happy-go-lucky, optimistic sort of soul element, adds up to the final result being Sagittarius is probably the most optimistic of every sign in the zodiac. Even like more than Leo, I would say, because they're a bit less self-conscious and a bit more carefree than Leo. This brings me on to my next point, though. I do feel like Sagittarius is probably the least emotional by far of the three fire signs, which is quite interesting because they have this high optimism, but they are sort of almost like a combination between a fire sign and an air sign. Of course, they don't actually have any air because they are the mutable fire sign, but they kind of are closer to the character of an air sign sometimes than a fire sign, in that they are quite intellectual and logical, and they are more about that than they are about emotion, if you like, or the emotional side of life. I would say Leo is definitely the most emotional fire sign and the most self-aware. Sagittarius, the major difference between the Leo and the Sagittarius, other than the adaptability that Sagittarius is willing to do that Leo isn't, the other major difference I would say between Leo and Sagittarius is that Sagittarius is less emotional by far. Like, Leo goes more on their heart, Sagittarius goes more on their head, I feel like. And fire does kind of go with their heart in general, all of the three fire signs. But Sagittarius does as well, but the least so, I would say. They're probably the most sort of logical, and they go with their heart as much. They go with their head, sorry, as much as their heart, I would say. Whereas Aries and Leo are a bit more, they go with what their intuition tells them. Sagittarius does that, but they're also wiser as well, so they also know how to listen to their head to temper their instincts, or vice versa, whatever they think they need to do, because they are the most highly evolved of the fire signs, as I said at the start of the video. So while they have this instinctive, and quickly reactive side to them, which is fire in general, because they're the highest evolution state of fire, they also have this greater knowledge of the world, and they sort of this spiritual knowledge, this universal knowledge, and because of that, they can rein in their instincts and look at things in a more objective, logical, intellectual point of view, sometimes, which the other two fire signs don't really have the ability to do. They're a bit more emotionally reactive. And they can, Sagittarius, as I say, they can act more like an air sign sometimes than a fire sign. They can kind of detach themselves somewhat emotionally from the situation. They can look more objectively, more logically at the situation, and kind of in that way they can think a bit more like an air sign. But because obviously they are still a fire sign, they do still have this instinctive sort of emotional reactivity being high, which is what fire affords in general to everyone who has, dominant fire energy in their chart. But as they are the highest evolved fire sign, they are more able to have kind of this airy approach to life now and again, where they can kind of control themselves. I would definitely say that Leo, they have a lot of self-control as well, but I would say Sagittarius probably has the most self-control in the sense of their behavior, the aspect of behavior, and they're self-expressing as well. They are very self-aware, like Leo, but they're a lot less dramatic. Well, actually, they can be more dramatic because Jupiter, as I say, it expands and magnifies everything. So, like Leo, Sagittarius can like to put on a show and be very over dramatic, but they're also self aware quite a lot, like the Leo. But I would say that the Sagittarius is more self controlled in the sense of behavior. Like, deep down, they have this. They're not as restless in the sense that they're not as aggressive. They're not as if you threaten them, they have to put you in your place. They're a bit more calm in that way. They're a bit more detached. They're a bit and it also is helped by the fact that they're so super optimistic as well. I feel like is that they kind of because they're so optimistic, they kind of don't really get offended easily. So even if you're offending them to try and make them angry, of course, Aries and Leo, they will get angry and they will argue with you. They'll initiate a confrontation. Sagittarius will want to do that too on one side of them because they are still a fire sign, but this more intellectual, detached, sort of almost like an air influence they have because they have more logic than the other fire signs as they're the most highly evolved. That's coupled with their optimism to make them not so wanting to argue with you because they're not offended by what you're saying as much as the Aries and the Leo. They're not as sensitive. They have a very big ego still, but it's less easily wounded. It's more sort of stable, if you like. Their ego is stable deep within them, and no matter what you say, it can't really hurt them. It can't get to their ego. Another thing is that Leo has this regal air about them. I'm the king and queen. If you treat them with disrespect, they kind of are condescending towards you. They look down on you. They're like, how dare you speak to me like that? Sagittarius doesn't have that. In a sense, they're a lot more down to earth. They're kind of a lot more. They'll kind of get mad at you at first if you're trying to condescend them. But Leo, whilst they'll condescend you back even worse than you did to them to put you in your place and hurt your pride and ego if you've done it to them, Sagittarius will kind of get mad and snippy at you, but then later they'll just completely move on and they'll be best friends with you again. Because one, they're highly optimistic, as I say. Two, they're not as they don't have this strong of a sense of self-importance that Leo does, and they don't have this strong sense of fight and self-preservation like Aries does. So they're kind of in the middle. They're a little bit more they don't fight as much, and they also don't have such a strong self-importance or self-righteousness. So they just quickly move on from conflicts. They're kind of okay, well, one, I'm optimistic, so it really is not that bad, because they see the bigger picture of life. So that's why they don't really get hung up by small confrontations, because they see the bigger picture of life, and that also helps their optimism stay strong and high as well. But when you go and apologize to an Aries, they're going to shout and scream at you if you've pissed them off. When you go and apologize to a Leo that you've pissed off, they're going to look down on you, condescend you, be kind of reluctant to accept your apology because you've hurt their pride and ego. Sagittarius, though, when you're apologizing to them, they'll just be like, hey mate, it's fine, I don't care, I kind of popped off at you. They might even apologize because they are very fair-minded too, actually, similar to kind of Libra in that sense. So they might even come to you and apologize or admit that they might admit that they went over the top with their anger. They do have a temper. Sagittarius has a really bad temper in the heat of the moment because they are a fire sign, but they will tend to admit it later. They're very much aware if they've overreacted to something, and they will apologize for it. Which the other two fire signs, they don't, because their ego kind of gets in the way. Sagittarius won't care, and they're not intimidating at all either. So when you come to apologize to them, they're quite light and carefree about it. They're kind of yeah, you don't even need to apologize, mate. It's fine. I'm not mad at you at all. Let's move on. Let's forget it even happened. They are the most ethical fire sign too. They kind of are the most humanitarian fire sign. They care the most passionately about humanity at large, I would say. I mean, Leo is highly generous and like caring and compassionate, don't get me wrong, but they are more like that with other people, but they care the most about themselves because they do have this self-righteous sort of attitude. Sagittarius is kind of literally like they love themselves a lot, like Leo, but they also love other people in the world just as much as they love themselves. They're not as self-righteous and egocentric as Leo in that sense. Another thing is that because Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign, they have the least intense, heavy sort of aura, I would say, of the three fire signs. Like, they're not as much in your face. They are very boisterous. They're very loud because of the Jupiter influence. It wants to expand and magnify everything. So in social interactions, they normally speak very loud. They're going to gesticulate wildly, similar to Gemini and Leo. They're going to want to put on a show. They're going to want to be kind of, to an extent, the center of attention, but not always. But they're going to be they're lighter because they're the mutable fire sign. The fire with Sagittarius is the least stable. So Aries is kind of this burst, as I say, of like concentrated energy and then it dies off. Leo is this steady kind of burn that just carries on and on and on. And it's stubborn, it can't move, it can't change really. Sagittarius, it's kind of in between. It's like a real world example I'd liken Sagittarius to is they're kind of like a campfire. Like when you go on a hike or a trail, and also this links in with the fact Sagittarius loves travel. A lot of people admit one of the main traits of a Sagittarius character person, especially if it's their sun sign, is that they love travel, they love new experiences, they love freedom, they hate to be caged in or tied down, they want to be constantly moving, they don't like clingy people for the same reason. They have this very freedom-loving spirit, and in that sense, they're actually similar to their opposition in the zodiac, their opposite sign, which is Gemini, in that they both want these freedom to have new experiences, this sort of free spirit, if you like. They are not restrained by walls, society's conventions. They do not care. They just do whatever they want. But because of that, they are highly adventurous. So, say you're going on a hike up a mountain, or like you're just going camping, or doing something exotic, traveling the world, and you light a campfire to obviously keep your camp warm, ward off any potential predators that are in the area, possibly that might attack you if you're just camping in the darkness without a fire. Like, fire has this element of protection when you're out in the wild. It stops animals from like going into your tent and like attacking you, or like coming too close to you. And it obviously provides light, it provides warmth and heat. So that kind of campfire and that community sort of adventurous spirit that the campfire sort of has come to represent to people and humanity, that is kind of representing Sagittarius character. Because also, like, when you're toasting marshmallows at like a bonfire and you're just sitting around telling stories about what's happened in your past, in your life, and you're meeting new people, you're having this free, light-hearted conversation, those sort of like peaceful sort of things. But it's to do with adventure, exotic travel, teaching, preaching. Sagittarius is the philosopher, like they're kind of the teacher. They have very strong morals, and they teach it to other people. They can preach, which is a negative thing. They can preach way too much, which gets highly annoying after a while. And they can come across as a know-it-all for that reason too, similar to an Aquarius. But that sort of whole ideology that you tell stories sitting around a campfire and meet new people in that sense, possibly too. That is the Sagittarius character summed up in a nutshell, I would say. They're also like a forest fire when they're angry. Like when they're less contented, they sort of spread. They burn like a forest fire. They cause destruction everywhere. And because they're mutable, they're going in all different directions, very haphazard. Also, the smoke that's emitted from any fire is another good way of describing Sagittarius real world examples, because smoke, obviously, it's not the flames of the fire, they're a bit more contained. The smoke just kind of blows away from the flames of the fire and it goes in all directions and chokes you. That would be another way of describing Sagittarius when they're angry, because they are also mutable. So that, like the smoke, they're going to drift in all different directions across the air, across the sky. They're not going to be the flames of the fire, which is less sort of spreading. Obviously, it spreads, but it's not going to flow across the sky. But the smoke will. That smoke is another way to describe Sagittarius and their mutable potential. Because Sagittarius is the most adaptable fire sign, I would say they're sort of the one who is probably the most, I as I say, open to new input, open to new ideas. They can, to an extent, adapt their own behaviour in order to get on better with you or other people, especially if they want to do that with you. So they're adaptable, optimistic in that sense. And they're really fun people. I really like the sign of Sagittarius overall because they have an ego, they have self-importance, but it's restrained, it's not so intense as the other two fire signs, a bit more mellow. And because of that, they are also the most fun-loving. They're sort of I don't know, they're almost like a protector as well, and they're a teacher. Like they want to teach you all this worldly knowledge that they've gained. They see the big picture. And just touching on very quickly on the opposition between Gemini and Sagittarius. So Gemini is kind of like they want to learn superficial level of about 100,000 different topics in the world. Sagittarius has the same curiosity, but Gemini focuses on the small details, the little details of every matter. Sagittarius is more about the broader perspective, the bigger picture. They do not care about the small details. They actually get annoyed by Virgos because Virgos focus so much on the small details and miss the bigger picture. And Gemini can focus a little bit, not as much as Virgo, but Gemini can also slightly focus on smaller details of a matter or a matter at large. But Sagittarius is the whole picture. They do not care about small matters. Like if you argue with them, the Virgo will kind of pick up like little words that you've said in the argument and try and analyze them from your side. Gemini will be like, this argument happened, and they'll analyze it that way. Sagittarius will not even care about the argument. They'll be like, okay, well, this is a lack of trust. Get out of my life. You're restraining me. You're restricting my freedom. They won't focus on details of the actual argument. They'll focus on the whole picture. And they'll be like, what does this mean in my life? Like, you're not good for me. And then they'll think along those lines. They think in broad strokes. They don't think about the details of one specific argument. They'll think about the whole picture. And the thing is that Gemini is more sort of, this argument happened, why did it happen, and analysing it in that sense. Sagittarius is more, this argument happened because of this underlying sense of distrust or whatever the case may be. They see what's beneath the surface causing this argument to occur on a more broad perspective, whereas Gemini's more like, wow, this random argument's happened, what happened during this argument? And so the kind of their logical abilities are in different sort of universes, if you like. Like they just focus on different things of the same picture, if you like. Like they have the same topic, but they just intellectualize it in different ways, if you like. Hope that made some sense. But yeah, so basically, Mercury is weakened, in other words, detrimented in the sign of Sagittarius because they are opposite to Gemini, which is one of Mercury's home signs where it's in dignity. So correspondingly, because Sagittarius is opposite, Mercury is detrimented, it is weakened. So if you have Mercury in Sagittarius, you're going to have Jupiter influence in your language. So as I say, it's this magnification and expansion, but it's also this good luck. It's larger than life because Jupiter is the largest planet in the sky. So your language is going to be very big, very bold. The kind of expansion and the large size of Jupiter is going to come out in terms of your volume, in the sense you're going to be very, very loud with speech, like Leo, but kind of probably even worse. You're not putting on a show as much as them, though. You're just doing it because it's just natural for you to speak loudly. But you can shout very loud when you're angry. That's definitely true. I don't know, you're just going to have this, you're going to be very jolly with your words. That's a really good way to describe it. And the same with a Sagittarius rising as well, is you're going to look to other people to be big, larger than life, sociable, and you're going to look larger than life in terms of your high sociability, your high sort of acceptance of, unique people, your high levels of friendliness and adaptability to whatever situation you find yourself in, your loudness, your animated speaking style. All of this is going to just have this sense of expansion. You might even physically, with your physical appearance, be really tall and thin, or you might be really short and stubby, but you're just going to have something about you that which looks larger than life because of these themes of Jupiter, because it is the biggest planet in the solar system, it is larger than life. And the whole character of Jupiter is it wants to make everything bigger. So you're going to look like that. And obviously, if it's Mercury Sagittarius, it's not the best placement, but this sort of larger than life sort of thing is going to come out in your speech. Sagittarius wise, and your whole external behavior is just going to be where that comes out to other people. The Sun, Sagittarius, the Sun is a fire planet, so there's no direct interaction with Sagittarius, but they are both fire signs. So the Sun, I guess you could say, is quite happy in Sagittarius, relatively speaking. So yeah, you're just going to adapt all these Sagittarius traits. You're not going to be as restless as the Moon Sagittarius, because the Moon is not as happy with Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius is so optimistic as a sign, so it will give the Moon this sense of expanded optimism, which the Moon will like, because it will make it less moody and emotional than the Moon normally is. So it's going to be this more optimistic, sort of intellectual, less emotional thing, and that will rub off on the Moon, and the Moon will probably actually kind of like that. But it gives it a break from its emotional tornadoes, which normally would categorize the Moon more, the mood swings. But it's fire in a water planet, so it's not that compatible. So, and it's a deeper level thing, because your Moon is the deepest, most private part of your character that you don't show to most people, but you feel it deeply. It's like the Sun is a want or an external personality, and your rising is your very external, shallow appearance, but the Moon is a need. The Moon is like a deeper felt need in your life. You need to satisfy your Moon. Versus your Sun, you'll strive to satisfy your Sun because it's your ego, your personality, but you need to satisfy your Moon, and it's kind of what you already are versus what you're striving to become. That's the difference between the Sun and Moon. I'll do another video explaining that a bit more in a different series, but as I say, the Sun Sagittarius is more contented. The Moon Sagittarius, it's not terrible, but it's going to be a bit more restless. It's going to be a bit more sort of aggressive, because it is more of a clash between those two energies. But you will be very optimistic in your emotions, which at least is good. You're not going to hold grudges. You'll move on quickly from any problems that you feel emotionally. If you have a setback, you're going to have the optimism to just, dust yourself off, stand up, and just get going again and do something else new. You're not going to take failures or setbacks to heart. So that at least is a good thing. Now, Venus Sagittarius. Now, this could be quite similar to Leo and even Aries Venus. It's going to be quite a romantic placement. There's no direct interactions, positive or negative, but you will be quite stereotypically romantic, or the fire signs will have this sort of approach as well. You won't be as dramatic and showy in your romance as you would if you had Venus Leo, and you're not going to be as aggressive, pursuing the object of your affection or desire. Like if you fancy someone, you're going to aggressively pursue them as you would with Venus and Aries. Venus Sagittarius, as I say, like Sagittarius in general, they are kind of halfway between Aries and Leo, so you're going to kind of want to pursue aggressively the object of your affection, but not as much as Aries. You're going to be probably less loyal than Aries, because you're going to want to be a bit more freedom loving. Therefore, you're probably going to be less emotional and less romantic. You're definitely going to be less romantic than Leo Venus, and you're not going to mollycoddle your partner half as much as a Leo Venus, because a Sagittarius Venus, they have this sense of need and freedom. Not as badly as Aquarius, but you do still have this need for freedom and detachment. So you're probably not going to be as romantic, but because you're a fire sign, you're still going to have this romantic, want at your core. Mars Sagittarius. Now, again, there's no direct interaction between Mars and the Sagittarius sign, but Sagittarius is one of the most energetic signs, and I did kind of touch on this in the Aries and Leo separate, character description videos too, but the fire signs in general are all highly energetic. They're active physically. They can burn themselves out, though, by pushing their bodies too far physically, but they do have this energy, this stamina. However, Leo, I would say, is the least energetic fire sign. Just because they're still highly energetic, don't get me wrong, but because they're water kings and queens, they're self-contagious, they don't use their energy sometimes. They can be lazy because they expect other people to do the hard work for the Leo, and the Leo will just get the rewards of that hard work, but not actually put the effort in themselves. They'll expect other people to do the hard work for them, and then they'll get the rewards. But the person who actually did the hard work, they won't get the rewards. So they're energetic, but they can indulge this self-indulgent lazy streak when they feel like it. Aries, because they also dignify Mars, they're the most energetic by far. Sagittarius is in the middle. Sagittarius is very bubbly, very friendly, energetic. I would say they are more energetic than the Leo, but less than the Aries, obviously. So that's kind of, again, falling in the middle. But they are more energetic than the Leo. They're less lazy. They will work harder, in a sense, to get what they want from life. They won't expect other people to do the hard work for them, and then they get the rewards. instead of the person who worked hard. Sagittarius will work hard. They're also fair and ethical, so they will not accept success if they didn't work hard for it, sort of, if you catch my drift. So Mars Sagittarius, you're going to be aggressive if provoked, you're going to get angry if provoked, you're going to use words as weapons, similar to Mars Gemini, your opposite, but less articulately with words. You're more just going to be using words to upset someone and slag them off in the heat of the moment with your little fire blow up, your fire explosion. But as I said earlier, they're very, very optimistic and not as emotional as the other fire signs, so you'll quickly forgive and forget, and you won't be intimidating or aggressive when someone comes to apologise to you. You'll probably accept their apology before they even ask for an apology, because you'll just know that they're going to apologise, and you'll just not even, you'll accept it before they even do apologise. You'll just be like, yeah, I know you're going to say sorry, but you don't need to, it's fine. And they will apologise themselves if they know they've overreacted or done wrong to you too, because they will put their ego away and not let it get in the way when they're having to apologise for something, especially if they know they've done wrong, because they do have this sense of justice and fairness. So yeah, sorry that video was pretty long, but I think I got out exactly what I wanted to say about Sagittarius. Thank you for listening and watching. Well, listening, I guess, because you can't see anything, but yeah, thank you for tuning in, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye.